Hey there folks, Comics Gatekeeper here, and we're doing the next part of The Boys. This is from Omnibus 5, and Huey and the Colonel are having a little heart-to-heart about his history. Bring your glass. They're going for a walk. I got home in July of 45. For a while it looked like the army would be needed in the east. But then they dropped the A-bombs on Japan, and that was that. No war, and a new world. And I have no idea what my place in it was. After that business in the woods, I had no sense of victory. It felt like there was still some unfinished business, some other battle I should go fling myself into. I ran into Rick Berman, an old friend. I told him about what happened. He tells me about some people he knows in Washington. He's going out there in a week and I should come with him. He needs people that are young and hungry. I tell him I'm not hungry, I'm angry. He laughs and says that'll do fine. Take my first step into joining the CIA. Jings, do you own all this? Yeah, my family's rich. In DC I met the friends of Rick's, all young ex-officers, my league of boys, all from good families one way or another. All with the same axe to grind. Except for one, Wild Bill Donovan. Ran the Office of Strategic Services during the war, and pretty much what the agency would become during peacetime. Larger than life character, a couple of 100 years ago he'd have been a pirate. When an evil company tried to blend in, that was one of his. Rick was Marine. Rick talked about the sands, black, red, and the surf just frothing with blood of bodies. So many body parts all wallowing together like a giant raft, shifting limb after limb. That mass had been men, he said. Now I begin to see why we're here. Jesus, this had all better have been for something. There are American boys lying strewn across the beaches and fields. Bottoms of oceans are hanging from barbed wire all over this goddamn planet. And they did not die so the old ways can continue. The Europeans are not going to be allowed to restore their empires and carry on as if nothing had happened. We will not allow what's been fought for and paid for slip through our fingers. The world owes us, gentlemen. And by God, we're going to collect. And so began the shit show of the late 20th century. Oh God, here we go. We stood on our beaches, clearings and woods and knelt in the blood of our beloved dead. We reached out for something to make it right. Not once did we consider we were starting from the wrong place. All we could think of was it had to mean something. That things like this couldn't happen and the world just wouldn't even blink. But dress it up as you might, as a debt to be collected towards better times, a protection against the future, against repeat afflictions. The meaning we had chosen was revenge. More? Aye, please. She was a doll. She made you believe in things. I know which one of them done it, and I'm going to fucking have him for it. I was on about A-Train. I thought it wasn't so much for the war. I think it was what happened to your men. Quite right. It was Voight and their soups. After all, you can't really blame them. The WAF and SS only doing what comes naturally. But a funny thing happened on the way to the moral high ground. See, when the time comes for me to tell the story, you can probably imagine it's 1945. I'm telling people about flying men and women who can lift tanks. No one sneers at me, not immediately. No, am I cast out? It's pretty clear. In modern parlance, I am decidedly off message. William Donovan wanted a single agency to coordinate all the secret intelligence of the United States government, to act boldly and decisively in every corner of the globe. That was the goal it was going to take. The distractions were very unwelcome. The new enemy had been identified in the shape of Soviet Russia. Indeed, many said that once we dispensed with the Germans and Japanese distraction, we were finally going to get down to the main event. Damn. Ah yes, the Cold War. I was born on the end of that one. My younger brothers and sisters don't remember it at all, obviously. But yeah, I remember the whole mutually assured destruction bullshit and all that other crap. CND protests and, yes, all manner of other hippie freakery. No one reported hearing anything like it remotely again. Men with wings, storybook costumes, senatorial backing. I did all the research I could and concluded that Voight had widely decided to scrap the project. The strange thing was that Donovan didn't last. He'd always treated Harry Truman as if he was a hayseed, a mistake a lot of people made. And J. Edgar Hoover downright loathed him. Intelligence, after all, was preserving the ever-expanding FBI. Oh. Wait, what? J. Edgar Hoover, oh yeah, he ran the FBI. There were mutterings of American Gestapo, and Wild Bill was dismissed, but in the end it didn't really matter. The spirit of what we were remained. We built a spy service. We went straight to work behind the Iron Curtain. It was 1946 and we were ready for it. We were parachuted all over Russia and Eastern Europe, gave them weapons, transmitters, told them to liaise with local freedom fighters and establish espionage networks that infect the Soviet Union like a virus. Except the Russians killed every last man we sent. We didn't find this out for many years, but they'd been waiting for us. They had spies of their own in the West. If there were any local freedom fighters actually worth talking about, those groups had already been completely infiltrated or destroyed. So they scooped up our people, tortured them and shot them, got the radio codes they needed, and said plenty. Potential here, send more equipment. Send more everything. And Christ, we did. Wow, I did not know that. Yeah, it's a lot easier to infiltrate a free country than it is a police state. That was always the Russians' advantage. Our mistake was thinking a bunch of can-do cowboy boy scouts could take on one of the most sophisticated espionage organisations in history. The KGB, of which Putin was a member, I believe. First and foremost, they were Russian Soviets. They had several hundred years of clandestine operation experience to draw on, and we didn't. Years later I checked the records. Of the 42 OSS agents that Bill Donovan dropped in, only 2 were ever heard from again. At this point I should talk a little about spies and teams and special forces. First of all, a spy is not an impeccably dressed assassin in an Aston Martin. Generally he's a seedy little man who you wouldn't look at twice. The same is often true of the man who sent to kill him. He's bitter, spiteful, malcontent. If his life had turned out the way he wants, he would have been a janitor. Then again, he gets the job done because no one's looking at him twice. Which leads me to the team. Another notion beloved and misconstrued by writers of fiction. Oddball individualists brought together for common cause. The cool-headed leader who snaps commands, the muscle with the hard hair trigger, the femme fatale. And some more fatal than others. The screwball, the innocent kid, the loner, with the secret. The specialists achieving more united than they ever could apart. Which leads me to the special forces. And if this phrase doesn't put the very hairs on the back of your neck up, then you haven't been going to the movies. It's a powerful concept, there's no denying. They have their place. You could argue that the campaign against the insurgency in Pakistan has seen them truly come into their own. But the mystique around covert military operations has bewitched some surprising people down the years who should have known better, like Churchill and Kennedy. The reality is, they're the most motivated individuals. They cost a lot to train and maintain for limited returns. I did not know that. And they can find it hard to justify the expense sometimes. And sometimes they create their own missions, becoming a private armies. Pakistan again, where you may have read civilian fatalities have become a source of much embarrassment. You think the boys have turned into that? So do you, according to Mother's Milk. I just wondered. What is a black budget? I can't imagine the cash. Something that pays that well. Open to abuse? Yeah, I mean, if there's a real mission here, the soups need watching, there's no denying it. Oh, I knew that from the beginning. This is where my narrative begins with the mission I assigned myself. Oh, there they are, the superheroes. Crime Fighters Incorporated, Soldier Boy, Steel Knight, Ladio, Eagle the Archer, Manbot, The Buzzer, Crimson Countess, meet the press. They'd been renamed, and you could tell from the picture they weren't the same people under the masks. Being sold as anti-crime with vague, i.e. non-existent government credentials. The word military wasn't mentioned once. Eventually, of course, these particular clowns would become the group you know as Payback. A few adjustments to the cast and the lineup. The Tech Knight's case, the franchise. They were good to go, but in 1950 they just seemed brand spanking new. Unless you'd been in a certain location in the Ardennes several years before, in which case your world had just capsized. Have you seen this post today? Have you seen the thing I was trying to tell you about? Greg, where the hell are you? I'm in the park. It's Saturday. Get your ass in here. Saturday's cancelled. North Korea just invaded the south. There's a fucking communist army coming across the 38th parallel. And it doesn't look like there's anything we can do to stop them. Get in here now because we've got a shooting war. If it's not one damn thing, it's another, of course. You'd be forgiven for wondering why the Central Intelligence Agency didn't see it coming, but of course that's another story. You said 1950. That's when they introduced crime fighters. Isn't that the year before Homelander was born? The legend told me they were brought out in '69. He said they'd really been stuck in a bunker with a nuke for the past 18 years. When Voight announced these other guys, they'd already been on the way. Very good. In fact, Jonah Vogelbaum had been working on Homelander for years. As you know, he was the first soup to be born as such. With the others, they were simply humans injected with V as adults. Not a patch on what Vought had hoped they'd eventually be, of course. But what the hell? You got them, why not use them for something? Blaze the trail, lay the groundwork for him. When you're eventually ready to tell the world, I watched them do it. Korea was one big thing, but the big war would stay cold. We all settled in for the long haul. And through all of it, Castro and United Fruit and all the other distractions, I kept one eye firmly on Voight. They were running the same star routine that they do today. They were smart about it. Anyone mentioned soups in defence, the guys would be laughed right out the door. A less suspicious man than I might even have thought they'd learned their lesson. After all, who would want to risk another massacre? But I watched them worming their way into popular culture, wrapping the flag around them. I couldn't help but think this was going somewhere. The idea being that one day I'd march into my boss's office and present him with documentary evidence of the greatest threat to national security since the Confederacy. Then I got a wake-up call. Did the legend tell you about Durang? What's that? Oh, this is Vietnam. I was in Saigon at the time visiting field office with Rick Burnham. Rick was senior to me by now, having kept his mind on the job a little more successfully than me. Word came in that something terrible had happened up north, and we grabbed our sidearms and a couple of flak vests and hopped in the next Huey. This is a goddamn disgrace. Magazines are practically made out of aluminium foil. I doubt you could get off 5 rounds without the friggin' feed buckling. I can't believe this was sent to our men in combat. This is garbage. Oh, Voight made it by any chance. Jesus, look what they've done. They put their heads on spikes. Oh, on their rifles. Which they left behind, of course, because the rifles are shit. Can you imagine what these kids must have gone to, getting overrun, watching the noose tighten until they're back to back, and then it's rifle butts and fists and teeth. I don't have to imagine it, I know it very well. I just can't see how this happened, how these money-grubbing pricks were allowed to equip American soldiers. They were the lowest bidder. Come again? American capitalism, Greg. Better put the brakes on that. Are you turning into some kind of socialist now? Fucking ha. I thought the point of you and I answering the call was to stop these things from ever happening again. No, the point was, if it was ever going to happen again, we were going to make it mean something. So what the hell is all this? What does it mean? The cost of doing business. The point was to engage Soviet and Chinese communism. The point was the war. The details didn't matter. But Bobby Kennedy went right after Voight and the rifles, and he bloody crucified them. They came back 3 years later with Homelander, and that's when I knew I'd been right all along. It was the legend who made the next move. He got himself filmed at a memorial service for the Air Cavalry. I knew nothing about comics, but my secretary pointed him out on the news. That's the funny little man who runs Victory Comics. My boys love him. I was curious. A Voight man feeling guilty for his company's actions, that didn't play at all. But a glance at the records, There's a lieutenant in Bravo Company that seems to have the same name. Christ, his son. The first one, not the bastard who'd helped produce with Maeve. Oh, what was his name? The one with the hamster fixation that became a zombie. Oh, wow. I want my hamster back. Oh, what was his name? Yeah, Huey doesn't know his strength and accidentally guts him. But yes, that poor hamster. He must have seen some things. Kind of like Lemmy Winks in South Park. But anyway, let's get on. Vogelbaum? But didn't he kill himself? No, he didn't. The legend thinks he did. So does Mother's Milk and the other two. Then again, they think the V that Butcher used on you was stolen from me. I had two objectives. One, because the agency didn't care about Voight, I was on my own. I had to turn the Supes and their owners into an actual visible threat. Two, I had to be able to neutralise or combat that threat. In pursuing these objectives, I was finally able to utilise the skills and resources of the CIA for something worthwhile. I learned Vogelbaum's location from the legend. I anonymously sent the details to the CEO of Boeing, Dow, General Dynamics and several other major Voight competitors. Then I went for them to check the information and act. Then I followed his abductors to the initial RV and eliminated them all. Doing the same to Vogelbaum. He'd created Stormfront for the Nazis, and then turned over the kid to the VA and started the suit program for them. But it was his creations that got my battalion slaughtered. He'd given us Homeland, our Black Noir, the whole Aryan dream made real. God only knew what his experiments would enable Voight to do in the future. And when it came to it, I didn't have it in my heart to shoot a simpering 70-year-old man. It was a classic scatterbrain academic, hiding in his work from the memories of his family's murder, hiding from the reality of where that work was headed. I wonder if it's significant that he's wearing stripy pyjamas. He put me in mind of Oppenheimer, realising far too late exactly what he'd achieved. Killing him wouldn't stop it. Voight could replicate it. The entire line of the Seven had already been established, so I decided he'd come and work for me, and Uncle Sam. So why does everyone think he slashed his wrists? There are certain freelancers the agency employs to produce cadavers, lookalikes. Essentially it happens off the books with payments in cash. No one in the authority wants to know. A recently deceased generic male to rise height and weight had been beaten beyond recognition. Resisted his abductors, radial ulnar arteries were open, blah 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 blah. So that was that. I briefed the old man very carefully. He'd woken up to the disastrous potential of what he'd created, and he didn't much care to play ball. His work had become prohibitively expensive, and it had taken a long time to bear fruit. No problems there. It could not ever result in anything like Superman that the US Army would consider using on the battlefield. So when I eventually presented this magic formula to Rick 7 or 8 years later, it was what I'd asked for, a one-shot injection of V to increase the stamina, strength and endurance by about 20. It didn't make you fly or make you bulletproof. And Jesus, it took him long enough to come up with it. He organised the budget and left me to draw on it as I saw fit, and I made the most of the opportunity. Those were the days of wine and roses. Iran Contra had yet to come along and spoil all our fun. Iran Contra. That's when a American colonel suddenly decided to take it upon himself to ship weapons and deal drugs and set American foreign policy. So that's the official story. Unofficially, he carried the can for a secret operation that everyone fucking knew about. Anyway, enough of the history lesson. No one wants to hear about Colonel Oliver North. Let's see. I wasn't worried about Rick. He was a tough and shrewd operator. He always made the most of a bad situation. You're not very sentimental about each other, are you? We're the greatest generation, kid. Whiskey and iron. Guts and glory. Besides, I was right back inside in a year. And 2 years after that, he was director of the agency. Bodies buried and skeletons shut away. I've been quietly letting him cool down, but I picked my moment and made my pitch. We'd never have our army of supes. We just couldn't afford it. We couldn't announce what we did either, or Congress would hang, draw and quarter us over what we'd spent. But we could have operatives to oppose the supes, and the way things were going, we needed them. This was around 85. Vought had added the G-men to their roster, and all manner of others. They showed no signs of slowing down. I knew what they were selling, and so did Rick. It was only a matter of time before the winds changed, and they got the votes they needed on the hill. Soups in the army, and then the soups would... I'm assuming the next step would be take over, or at least Voight would take over. My pitch was simple: create a team. One created to do one job and aim like a bullet at the heart of Voight's American superhuman development program. We would manage, police, and liquidate when necessary. We would never get comfortable to begin the next stage of their agenda. The tiny reserve of one-shot V we did have was used to empower our operatives, for which, of course, we needed a guinea pig. Somebody had to be first. But didn't you say that teams weren't the way to go because teams always turn out wrong? I did indeed. But hindsight's always 20/20, isn't it? I started looking for likely candidates, and it wasn't long before I ran across Butcher. Next, outside in the cold. Okay, folks, take care. See you later. Bye-bye.